So one thing I like to talk about a lot is good things you could be looking for in a job and not so good things. Now, a lot of these are obvious, like a low salary, that's something you could consider to be a bad thing. And a good work-life balance, a lot of vacation time and benefits, that can generally be considered to be a good thing. But there are some things that if you don't want them, you should not want to see them. Hi, my name is Mark Ensley, and let's talk about why there are some good things that you actually want to try to avoid if those things are not something you're aspiring to have. Now, I'm coming from the perspective of someone that works in IT. Now, any kind of technical field engineering, I feel like this also applies to, but the further you get away from that, the less confident I can be that what I'm saying really holds true. And really what I'm saying only comes from my experience and the experiences of others who I've discussed these things with. And here's the thing. If you're working in an industry like technology, you're only going to get a few things that you want. And the reason for that is because that perfect job, because the job is more or less perfect, you're really not going to be able to get the things that you would get out of a job that wasn't in high demand. Now, these are things like not having to work long hours. Generally, this is going to be a perk of a job that isn't in high demand. Why? Well, because they can ask you to work long hours. If you decide you don't like that, they can find someone else that wants that, quote unquote, perfect job. So, what are a few of these things that this applies to? Well, the first thing is just something that's really cool. Now, obviously, cool could mean a lot of things, and there may be something that you think is cool that most of the rest of the world doesn't. In that case, this really does not apply. What I'm really speaking more towards are things that most people think are cool, or at least a very good portion of the population. So, example could be anything going into space, anything involving AI, anything involving virtual reality, game development in general. And you can probably continue to think of more. I'd even put one of the things I'm into, 3D printing, as one of those things. And here's the thing, if you do think any of these things are really cool, don't worry, this doesn't apply to you, but you should still realize something. And that's that if you are getting into something because you think it's cool, you are now putting yourself in competition with other people that want to be there for the same reason. Now that means that you may get a little less salary out of it. You may get a little less job security out of it. Your work environment may not be as good as it could be had that been your larger focus. Now, if something is really that cool to you, and it is cool to a lot of other people, I don't want that to dissuade you from going into it, especially if you consider this to be really important to you, because that can make you happy in your job. If you are working on something that you think is cool, that can make you happy. Now, I would persuade you to try to look for the thing that you think is cool that maybe not everybody else thinks is cool. Now, the next one is a lot of responsibility. Now, this one is a little bit different and can be very, very difficult. Responsibility is something that some of us crave to have, and this won't only potentially happen to you right at the beginning of your career. In fact, I'd suggest that it can happen really at any point in your career. And that can be that you develop a craving or desire to have more responsibility. Now, this is generally a good thing, but it's important to, kind of check yourself as you move along. And again, if this is happening to you straight out of college, this still applies. And that's just realize that once you have that more responsibility, it won't be nearly as easy to shed as it was to gain. And generally, that level of responsibility, or just the higher you go, the worse it is, requires a higher level of vigilance as well. Now, vigilance can be the complete enemy of work-life balance because it means that it will be harder for you to be away from your cell phone or your email. And you may feel there are more eyes on you in general, increasing the pressure on you to perform well. Now, if these are things that you don't like, that doesn't mean that you can't handle more responsibility, but it does mean that it's that much more important for you to just check yourself as you move along and make sure you're not asking to have something just because it's something that you could have. Try to imagine, and I know it's difficult to know if you want something before you've had it, but try to imagine what it may entail, what the sacrifices may be, and if necessary, speak with others about it. Speak with others that have maybe been in those positions of higher responsibility, about what it is. Now, there are other more technical reasons that you can see a good thing and you don't necessarily want it. And this one is going to be that it pays very well. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you to run away from jobs that pay well or just search for the job that pays the least, because Mark said jobs that pay well could be a red flag. But it is something that you need to look at closely, especially if you're early in your career. You need to be asking yourself, why does this position pay so well? And it helps to be in tune a little bit with the industry you're getting into so that you can make that judgment if it's paying a little bit too high. Now, this could be because the expectation upon this new position is unrealistic. You may be being asked to do something that most normal developers wouldn't be able to do, like resurrect an incredibly old code base and get it working again. And there are a lot of different things it can be, and generally it will be difficult for you to figure out what it is. But when I say an abnormally high salary can be a red flag, this is a reason why. Another thing that's important to ask if you see a salary that you consider to be abnormally high is to kind of dig into it and figure out, what does that entail? What does that salary entail? Because I have heard of situations where, companies will add on things to that salary that don't or shouldn't really count as the salary. Now, another thing that could be a red flag is amazing company culture. It's like, okay, amazing company culture. I'm just going to tell you to go away from all of the good things, right? Well, company culture is something that you have to be really careful about. That's because the best you can really do a lot of times to gauge a company's culture before working there is to watch a lot of their PR videos, and those pretty much tell you nothing about what their culture is really like. It goes all the way from, yeah, this is pretty realistic, to maybe even undersells what they have at that company, all the way over to the only people that ever have any fun at this company are the people that make these videos, and what you find when you get there is completely unlike any of those videos. So how can you judge this? It's really difficult to. You're going to have a hard time figuring that out from sitting at the interview, but there are some things that you can do. You can kind of try to be a little bit humorous if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a laid-back culture, you can try to see if you can start to make some kind of connection with the people you're interviewing with and see if that matches, the culture that you're more or less being promised. And just realize that most of what you see in these PR videos, is not quite going to be realistic for the individual, section that you're going to wherever it is that you're potentially going to be working. A lot of times the culture is different between departments or even between, groups of people within departments. It's very common. So good company culture can also mean other things, like, can you work from home? Is this completely remote? What's the dress code? And you want this stuff to be laid back, like that you have the ability to do remote work if you want to, and you can kind of wear more or less what you want. Well, if this isn't something that you want, then you probably wouldn't like it anyway. But realize that this is what most people want these days, at least technical people, I can say. We want this. We want remote work. We want it to be a laid-back environment. We don't want things to be, so tense. We want more freedom in how we do our work and more autonomy in general. So if you want this, I'd say it's definitely worth going for. But if it's not something that you want, realize that taking something that's a little harsher culture-wise might be a better thing for you to do, because you may be able to get paid more since there will be less people out there willing to do it. And that's going to be sort of the point here of a lot of what you can do to offset these things. So what are the things that you can do to kind of offset if you want some of these things? So sometimes in order to get what you want, it can help to make certain sacrifices. Now, one of these that you can make, and I'm going to kind of go through them just briefly, each one, is to get a job in a higher security space. Now, this is something that can help you because you generally have to pass some kind of security check to get this. This can range from security certifications all the way to complete examinations, and some of these can be kind of intrusive. But if you're a person that has lived a pretty clean life and you're not too opposed to having that revealed to the government, and they will put you through a lot of things, then that could be something that you can do to kind of increase your value in the market and maybe achieve a lot of these things you want. Heck, if you want to work somewhere that is considered cool, and what you consider cool is stuff that's happening in space, you may be up for doing this anyway, whether you know it yet or not. Now, another thing you can do is take a job that pays less. And again, I'm talking about things you can do to better get what you want. A job that doesn't pay very highly might be a little bit more lenient when it comes to things like work-life balance. If they're paying you less and you're working less hours, what I very much like to say is, you're actually making the same amount of money. And yeah, maybe you could make more working more hours and a higher salary, but is that what you want? Do you want to have that more money, or do you want to have the time to spend it on stuff and use said stuff? These are all trade-offs that you have to think about. Now, another thing you can do is go the opposite of the cool route and get into something that very much isn't cool. This could be working on older systems. Now, you have to be careful here because you don't want to put yourself in a position where your skills get outdated. But it could be working on things like, some people would consider the stuff I work on to not be that cool. It's basically a IT service system. It's a ticketing system where we can write, custom ticketing apps. A lot of people wouldn't consider that to be all that cool. Now, I kind of do because I'm really into automation, and I consider it to be a great automation tool, and I find automation a lot more cool than I think the average person does. And so I say that's the biggest thing that you can do, is really find the niche that you find is cool that not everybody else finds quite that cool. All right, guys, I hope this has been helpful. I know I haven't been making near as many videos lately, but I'm going to try to get back on the horse. Have a good night.